Since it need not be perfect, that it could have a withered leg or wing, or it could have a missing eyeball. Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, "Min ha'of," from the bird has to be complete. V'lo kol ha'of, but not any old bird, even if a wing or an eyeball is missing. Okay, the very last lines now. Amar Rav Chia Barashi Omer Rav Hoysalo. If a slave has if the slave has 6 fingers, an extra finger, and it is amputated, Evid Yetze Behem Lecheris, the slave gets to go free. Now the Gemara is going to qualify that ever so slightly. Omer Rav Huna Vahu Shenis Peres Al Gav Hayad. That only, literally, it means that only applies if you can count it on the hand. That's the literal meaning. But what it means is that the extra finger is aligned with the others. So you could amputate it, and a guy's hand looks normal, he would go free. But if the extra finger is some other bizarre place on the hand, then the slave amputating it is like doing him a taiva, and he doesn't go free then. Okay, now we're going to have a strange story. Sabe de Nizonia, I don't know, the elders of the city called Nizonia, lo asul leparshke the Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda was visiting town, and he gave a public drasha, and all the chachamim in the town didn't show up, and that was very distressing to Rav Huna. Amalei Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Chisda says to Rav Hamnuna, Zil Tzinanahu, go and literally close them in. What it means is put them in chayrim. When you're a Talmud Chacham, you don't want to be mevazer Torah. So a Talmud Chacham was put in chayrim, closes himself into his house and never goes out. That way he won't confront other people who have to ignore him and thus be mevazer Torah. Okay? Azil Amalahu. So Rav Huna went, Rav Hamnuna went, but before he put them in chayrim, he asked them why they didn't show up. I mean, what's going on here? Your big Talmud Chacham came to town and you're ignoring him. My time of the law Ravan Lefarkle. Why didn't you show up for the drasha? Okay, relay, they replied, my nisi, why should we show up? The ba'in and minay milsa v'lo pashatlon. We sent him a shaila, and he never bothered to answer us. So why should we show him covered now? Why should we show up? So now the Meforshim have a field day with this next line because it's seemingly a non sequitur. Amar lahui mi beiso minai mi di. Did you ever, Rav Abnuna says, did you ever ask me a question? Lo pshitan aloho, and I chose not to answer you. So they took this as a signal that they should ask him the question that Rav Chisda didn't answer. Okay, so me boy, so me. Did I ever ask you? Did you ever ask me anything? No, I didn't answer you. And boy, mine avdei shesersu rabo beitsimahu. What's the we learned the items that if they're damaged by the master, the slave goes free, and they were the 10 fingers, the 10 toes, the nose, the ear, both ears, and the tip of the penis. So they ask, what happens if the master cuts off a slave's testicles? If he castrates him by removing his testicles, um, is that considered a visible damage, and therefore the slave goes free? Although, or maybe since the testicles are concealed within the scrotum, they're not called visible, and you can crush a guy's testicles and he doesn't go free. So, lo have biyade. Rav Hamuna didn't know the answer. Amr lo, so the rabbi said to him, now these local rabbis seem to be a shtickle chutzpahdik. They didn't show up for this year, and now they're going to insult Rav Hamnuna. Amr lo, they said to him, because he didn't know an answer to a tough question. Ma shimcha, what's your name? Amr lo, Hamnuna. My name is Hamnuna. They replied, Amrle, they said back to him, Lav Hamnuna Ella Karnuna. Your name isn't Hamnuna, it's Karnuna. Now, Karnuna means the bums who hang out on street corners. So since he didn't know the answer to one question, already they're calling him a bum. So you see, these people are not exactly God's gift to Torah. Also, Lakami Rav Chisda, so Rav Hamnuna came back to Rav Chisda and told him what had happened. Amarle, Rav Chisda replied, Masnisa ba'o minach. You could have just told them over a certain Mishnah. That would be the answer to their question. The Tanan, we have a Mishnah that says, Arba Roshe Evarim Sheba Adam. There are 24 limbs that a person has, that if they're cut, that's called a visible damage, and would be and he would have a mum then.
Right, it's talking about tumah.
Oh, I'm sorry. In that Mishnah, it's talking about tumah. You're correct. Okay. Kulam ein matminin mishum michya. Okay. And all of them. Okay. So here's the deal. When you show up the first time to the Kohen with tsaras, he examines it. And then you come back a week later. Now, it has to have like grown more. Now, one of the possibilities of more growth is if somewhere in the middle of the tsaras, there develops a patch of skin that is not afflicted. So now the tsaras looks like a sedona. Now, one of the rules is that the Kohen has to see the whole tsaras in one shot. He can't move your hand to see it. So if you have this patch of good skin on the very tip of your finger, and the tsaras is a ring beneath that patch, the Kohen can't see it all in one shot. He has to move the finger. So therefore, since he can't analyze it, you're not tummy. Since it's impossible to examine it, it can't tell you you're tummy, can't tell you you're not tummy, so you remain in your cheskes kashrus, and you're not tummy. So that's what's going on. The Eluhem, these are the body parts that, because of the contour of that body part, you can't see the tsaras surrounding this patch, okay? Rashi Etzbois, tips of the fingers, Yadayim Beraglayim, and the tips of the toes. Vareshe Oznayim, the edge or the earlobe. Rashi Achaitim, the tip of the nose, Varashi HaKiviyah, and the crown of the penis. Now, when it comes to women, Varashi Dadim Shiba Isha, also the nipples on a woman's breast, because the contour of her breast makes it difficult to see the whole thing. Okay? And Rebbe, now he does not include a man's nipples because the contour of a man's chest is not as defined as a woman's breast, so you can see the whole thing. That's the Tanakama, but Reb Yehuda disagrees. Reb Yehuda Omer Af Ba'ish, even if the clear part is the nipple and the surrounding flesh has the tzaras, on a man, he says it's too hard for the Kohen to see it all in one shot. So that would, okay. So now, the Tanei and the Brisa that's related to this Mishnah says, Bakulam, all 24 or 26 if you count breasts, Eved Yaitse Behem Lecheres, he goes free. Now, Rabbi Meir Omer Af HaSerus, even if the testicles are crushed, even if a man is castrated, then Azai Omer Af HaLashon, even the tip of the tongue, because when you stick out your tongue, it's visible. Okay, so now we're going to look at this brisa and we're going to look at the sequence of wording. The sequence of wording seems to be Rebbe adds one thing and Ben Azai adds one thing. We're going to see that may not be so. Omar Mar, Rebbe Omer Af HaSerus, even if the person's testicles are crushed, he's castrated. Serus Demai. I added the word testicles, but the word really just said even if he's castrated. So how are we gonna demai? How are we gonna castrate this guy? If we're gonna say we amputate his penis, this is hard stuff. So if you want to cringe a little, you have rishus. If they're going to cut off his penis, Hainu give you. We already said that at the beginning. If you damage his penis, he goes free. El alav. So what do we have to be saying? Serus debayim. Cut off that his testicles are either removed or crushed or whatever. So you see that according to the Tanakama, crushing the testicles does not free him. But according to Rebbe, it does. Okay, so that should have been the answer to them. It's a machlokes. You can always say it's a machlokes. 99 out of 100 times you'll be right. Okay, Rebbe Omer Afaserus. Rebbe says also castration. The Rebbe Lashon Lo. Now, Rebbe came in the Brisa before Ben Azai. So seemingly, Rebbe agrees with the 22 or 24 or 26 by the Tanakama, and he threw in one more. Now, Ben Azai came along and he threw in yet another one. So Rebbe Lashon Lo, Rebbe leaves out the tongue. Ramino, I can challenge that. Now we're going to talk about the spritzing that a Kohen does to a person who's tummy. When you do the spritz, it has to land. It has to hit. You can't just throw it in the air. It has to hit the guy who's tummy. And this mixture of ash and water. And furthermore, it has to hit a part of the tummy person's body that is visible when he's dressed. Okay? Raminahu hare mishahayu mazeh. If the Kohen is spritzing and it has to land on a visible portion of the body, v'nisva v'haza'a al piv, and the spritz goes in the guy's mouth. Rebbe Omer Chiza, Rebbe says that's a valid spritz, and you're done. You're finished. You don't have to do more. V'chachamim omrim lo hiza, going into the guy's mouth is no good, and you have to spritz again so it hits some visible part of his body. My love. So what is Rebbe and the Chachamim arguing about in this memra? Alashino. We're talking about what happens if it hits when it goes in his mouth, it gets on his tongue. Okay, so obviously Rebbe, who says that it's good, he is holding that way because when you're speaking, when you stick out your tongue, when you're licking an ice cream cone, your tongue is visible to others. So tongue damage would be a visible damage, and therefore he should agree with Ben Azai. So it should, theoretically, the sequence should be the Tanakama, then Ben Azai adds tongue. Rebbe agrees with that, and he adds testicles. So we have, theoretically, the Mishnah should be structured differently. So this is now a contradiction, because the way we read that Bryce or that Mishnah, we see the Rebbe does not agree with tongue based on the sequence of statements in the Mishnah. Low. No, you got that all wrong. So what Rebbe and the Chachamim are arguing about is al smasov, that the spritz hits the
Lips.
Yeah, but not the outside of the lip, like the part of the lip. That if your lips are parted, if you're smiling, you can see it. But if you press your lips together, you can't see it. So when it said in his mouth, it really meant on his lips, on the part that's not visible when he purses his lips. Okay? So al svasav, on his lips, pshita. That's very obvious. They're visible, and therefore everybody should agree with Rebbe, and even the Chachamim should agree with Rebbe. Mahu Desema, what are you trying to tell me over here? Zimna, the Cholim decide that sometimes you purse your lips and you can't see the upper and the lower and the bottom in the upper lip portion. Kamash Malan, they are called concealed revealed according to Rebbe, and it would be fine to hit the lips. But we're going to argue with that. Visanya, we have a brisa. Va'otanya, and the brisa says alashono, if the water hits the guy's tongue. V'oitanya, and later on it says shenital rov halashon. Rebbe Aimer dov hadavar shibulashoinai. If you were to cut open a person, the tongue, we think of the tongue as the 2 inches that you move around in your mouth and you stick out. But if you were to dissect, like if you ever had tongue for dinner and your wife bought a whole tongue is a big thing that goes way back into the throat. So Rebbe says, when an animal is a bachor, and the Kohen has to bring it as a korban, but it has to be a tam. It has to be in perfect shape. So Rebbe says that if the majority of the movable part of the tongue, the part of the tongue you manipulate to make sounds when you speak, so it's not the whole tongue, it's only the front of the tongue. If the majority of that is missing from the bachor, then that's called the mum, and you can't do the korban with that bachor. So this proves that Rebbe said, because on an animal too, it has to be a visible mum. So here you see, Rebbe proves conclusively he holds the tongue as a visible organ. Ella. So now why does so now you see Rebbe agrees that the tongue is on the list. So why is he stuck in before Ben Azai? Ella, Rebbe Omer Seirus, the Rebbe talks about castration, veloba in lashon, and he obviously agrees with tongue. Ben Azai Omer Lashon, and Ben Azai says only the tongue, and he disagrees with Rebbe with regard to the testicles. Avo Serus Lo. Umay Af. So why did, if you go back and look at the Brisa, Ben Azai's statement is introduced with the word Af, and also Akamaisa. He means that the tongue is an addition to the original fingers and toes and nose and ears list. Okay? And so why is Ben Azai at the end? He should have been second and Rebbe should have been third. Nakdama Rabban Azai Beresha. The Brisa should have put Ben Azai right after the Tanakama before Rebbe. Tana Shmuel Rebbe, the author of this brisa, originally heard Rebbe's opinion. So he wrote the brisa, fingers and toes and ears and nose, and then stuck in at the end of the brisa, at that point in time, Rebbe's statement. And then Shmuel the Ben Azai, and then later on he heard Rebbe Ben Azai's statement. Vitane, and he stuck it into the brisa. Mishnah lo zaza b'mimkaima, but he chose to put them in chronological order of his hearing them, rather than mess with the already established brisa. Okay, so that's a notion that we can apply other times when there's an apparent contradiction in the brisa, but it's really not. It's just the way was organized. Okay, so now we have Rebbe and Ben Azai agreeing the tongue is involved. Okay, so we're going to do more tongue talk. Okay, Ul Omar Ula Hakol Maidim Belashon LeInyan Tuma. When it comes to Tuma, nobody disputes the tongue, because we said if the ash hits the tongue, it's fine. Okay, and how else do we know that? The golai who etzel hasheretz. If you're licking an ice cream cone and a sheretz come and touches your tongue, your tummy. So we see the tongue is nageya to Tuma. Okay. By the way, that was my addition. The Gemara doesn't mention the ice cream cone. The Gemara just talks about the guy sticking out his tongue. My timer, what's the rationale? Amar yiga bo, Amar Rachmana. Asher yiga bo, Amar Rachmana. The Torah says if it touches him, v'hainami, and the tongue is part of him. Ba negiyahu, because you can stick out your tongue, and therefore the sheretz can touch your tongue while it is exposed. Okay. Now, so if your tongue is part of your body, what about when you go to the mikveh? When you go to the mikveh, it has to touch your whole body. So do you have to open your mouth and drown when you go to the mikveh? Or can you close? The halach actually is you can close your mouth loosely, but not tightly. But be that as it may, le'inyan tefillah, when it comes to going to the mikveh, b'tamun dami, is the tongue considered not concealed, not revealed, but concealed? In which case you can close your mouth lightly, and the water does not have to fill your mouth. My timer, what's the rationale for that? That you don't have to open your mouth and get water in your mouth? V'ratzach v'rachatz b'sara b'mayim Amar Rachmana. Pasuk says, wash your flesh. Okay? And ma basro me avroi, since your skin, your flesh, is on the outside of your body, af kol me avorai, the only parts that the water has to touch are the outside of your body, but it doesn't have to go into your mouth or your tongue. Okay, now going back to the spritzing. Lo nechlaku ela le'inyan hazah. The only dispute regarding the tongue is that Rebbe says the tongue's good for the spritz, and the Chachamim say the tongue's not good for the spritz. Okay? Rame medame letuma. Rebbe, how do they make this distinction? They're going to look at the same pasuk. Rebbe compares the sprinkling to the tumah. The sprinkling takes away tumah, so it's logical, says Rebbe, to compare tumah to spritz. Just as the tongue sticking out of sheretz can touch it, and you can get tumah from it, so too, if the spritz hits your tongue, it might be convenient to stick it out, but you could just open your mouth wide, and that would be good enough. V'rabbanan midame la letfila. But the Rabbanan say, no, what happens after you spritz? That's part of the process. The next step is you go to the mikveh. Since you don't have to get your tongue wet when you go to the mikveh, wetting your tongue with the spritz is not good enough. That's their opinion. V'travaihu b'hai kra. They both learned their views from the exact same pasuk, a miflige, and that's what they're arguing about. What is the pasuk? V'hize hatahar al hatame, that the tahar kohen spritzes the tome individual. Rebbe Omer, and Rebbe says this is how you darshan the pasuk. V'hiza hatahar al hatame b'yom shlishi b'yom shvi'i v'chito, and you spritz on day 3 and day 7, and that's part of the purification process. V'rabbanan savrei, and the rabbis learn the pasuk a little bit differently. V'hito b'yom shvi'i, you spritz at the beginning is the same. You spritz on the 7th day, and then the pasuk continues. The key base begada v'rachatz b'mayim. You wash your clothes and you immerse in a mikvah. So they link spritz to mikvah. V'rabbanan, all right. So that's what they hold. V'rabbanan nami nidamya l'tuma. But the rabbis obviously agree that the whole process is because the guy's tameh. So why don't they do it Rebbe's way? Tahara mitahara havele lamele. He says we should link the first part of the cleansing process to the second part of the cleansing process. So the spritz should take its cue from the immersion. The Rebbe, so why that makes sense? Why didn't Rebbe go along with that? Why don't we put it together with tefillah like the Rebbe's do? Key base begadov. He says, just a minute. There's an interruption in the pasuk. It says you wash your clothes. So hefsik le'inyan, that divides the mikveh from the spritzing. So he'd rather learn the spritzing from the tuma because it's continuous. All right, next. V'sava Rebbe le'inyan tefillah k'to'un dameh. does Rabbi really say you can keep your mouth shut when you go to the mikveh because the tongue is not a visible organ? That would refute what he said, that it is a visible organ. Ha'amar Rabban Amar Reb Ada Amar Rebbe Yitzchak. We have a Messiah. Maisa Shebe Shifcha al Beis Rebbe, a servant girl in Rebbe's own house. Shabbat lava alasa. She went into the mikveh, and when she came out, they saw there was a little piece of bone stuck in her tooth. Okay? V'nimtza etzem ben shineha. There was a little piece of bone stuck in her teeth. V'hirtzicha Rebbe tvila cheres. And Rebbe ordered her to clean her mouth and go back to the mikveh. So wait a minute. If you can keep your mouth closed, who cares if there's something in your mouth? If you have to, only if you have to let water get in, would that be a problem? Yet it says that Rebbe calls it a chatzitza. So what's going on here? Nehi deba'as mayim lo be'inan. We're saying here that it is true that water doesn't have to go in your mouth. However, makam haroy lavo mayim be'inan. But your mouth has to be clean. So if water does go in, there's no chatzitza. Okay, that's a standard principle. And we're going to learn it in another instance, that if something is possible to do, it's not necessarily an ikov. But if it's impossible to do, not doing it is an ikov. Okay? Kid Rebbe Zera, like Rebbe Zera says, the Omer Rebbe Zera kol haroy bila. When you make a korban musaf,
Mincha.
I'm sorry, a korban mincha. What did I say? Has same name. If you're preparing, if you're the Kohen who's preparing a korban mincha, the procedure is you put the crumbled cracker in the bottom of the bowl, then you pour oil on, and then you mix them together. That's the be'ila, the mixing together. So, kol haroy labila, if it's possible to do the mixture, meaning the oil is on top and the cracker is underneath, and you could smush them together, then if you forget to do the belila, it's okay. And be'ila makevespo. The bila is not ma'akev. It doesn't ruin that mincha. Shani rui labila, but if it that's but she'eno rui labila. But if it's impossible to mix them, let's say you put the oil in a Ziploc bag and you plop it on top. So all the mixing in the world, the oil's going to stay in the Ziploc bag and the cracker is not going to get any oil on it. So she'enu roy labila, if it's impossible to actually mix it in the state it's in, bila makevispo, then it's no good. Okay, and we'll continue. Turn the page. Ketanai. So this business, going all the way back to the blemishes, is a machlokes tanai. The pasuk says, "Ma'och zechasos uchasos the natos the kiros." If the all right, if the genitals are squashed, crushed, torn, or cut off, that means you can't use that animal. If it's a male, obviously. Kulam debates him. So obviously, the Gemara says we're talking about the testicles. That's what you can crush. So Dibri Reb Yehuda, that's Reb Yehuda's view. But Beitzim, are we only talking or about the testicles? Below begin, you can crush the penis, you could tear it off, you could cut it off, you could smash it, do all these horrible things to the penis also. So Ella, so here's how you have to understand the brisa. Kulam, everything in the pasuk after him. Divrei Reb Yehuda, that it means the penis or the testicles. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Aimer, Kulam begid. No, we're only talking about the penis because that's visible, but the testicles are concealed in the scrotum, so they're not visible, and you need visible as part of the requirements. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Meyuch v'kosus. We're taught that crushing and squashing after Beitzim also include the testicles, because if an animal or a person has crushed testicles, the contour of the scrotum is altered, and therefore it's visible. Marty, you are Bucky in these things?
Yeah.
You're sitting there doing a targum over there. Okay, so after Beitzim. Nosuk ubekorus, but tearing off and cutting out, the gid ain apply only to the penis. The bayim low, they do not apply to the testicle, because if you have a vasectomy and you cut the link between the testicle and the body, the testicle is still there in the scrotum, and the contour of the scrotum is unaltered. Okay? Next Mishnah. We had been talking about kinyanim. We had the kinyan for a girl slave. We had the kinyan for a male slave. So now we're going to have the kinyanim for animals. Animals come in two categories, gedalim and a behema daka, a little animal. Little animals are sheep and goats. Big animals are cows, horses, camels, and maybe donkeys. Okay? Behema gasa, a big animal, niknes b'misira. The way that is acquired is if the seller hands it over to the buyer. So how do you do that? You take the reins that are attached to the bit and you hand them to the other guy. So if I'm selling you my horse, I take the money from you and I give you the rein on that was around the horse's neck, and that's Mesira. Okay? Hadaka, the small animals, sheep and goats, Bahagba'a. You lift the animal up, because it's a little animal. A shapsel weighs a couple of pounds, you can lift it up. Divrei Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Eliezer, they agree on those two inyanim. Okay? However, the Chachamim, the majority of the rabbis, Oimrim, Behema Dakla, the smaller animals, Nisnes b'Mashicha, you pull it toward you. Now, you don't have to hold the rein. You could hold its ear. You could patch it on the butt. But you make it come toward you. That's Mashicha. So, that's the end of the Mishnah. We go on to the Gemara. Doresh Rebbe Bikim Chunya. Rebbe went to the town of Kimchunyat and made a drasha, and in his drasha he said the following: Behem Gasa Niknes b'Mashicha. He disagreed with the Mesira. He said you can do Mashicha, you can pull the horse's rein, and he'll walk toward you, and that's a way of being b'kainem. Ashkechinahu Shmuel v'Talmidei the Rav. Now that's the end of that. Now, next Inyan, or the next step, Shmuel bumped into students from Rav. Amar lahu, he asked them, Mi Amar Rav behema gasa niknes b'Mashicha. Did I hear right? That Rav says you can be kind of a big animal with Mashiach, V'hana'an b'Mesira Tanah. But the Mishnah says only Mesira. Okay? So by handing over the rein. V'Rab Nami b'Mesira Omer. Meanwhile, other drushes that Rav gave, he agreed with the Mishnah that it's Mesira. So Hadar Beba Mehahi, did Rav change his mind all of a sudden? And he says Mesira is no good, you have to do Mashiach. So the Gemara now tries to tell us what Rav really holds. Huda Amar Ki Haitana. Rav was quoting the following brisa. The Sanya that brisa says, V'chachamim aimrim zu v'zu niknes b'mashicha. Both big animals and little animals can be acquired by pulling them towards you by Mashiach. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, and Rabbi Shimon says, Zu v'zu b'hagba'ah. You can't use just Mashiach, you have to pick it up. And if it's a horse, you still have to pick it up. Now we're going to learn pick it up means make it step up on something. But nonetheless, elevating it is the requirement according to Reb Shimon. Maskefle Reb Yosef. Reb Yosef argues with that. Elamiyata, if you're going to say only lifting, peel. The Rebbe Shimon Bama Yikna. How in the world are you kaina an elephant? Nobody can pick up an elephant. So they give another option. Omerle Abaya v'chalifin. If it's something like an elephant that's too big to lift, you can do a symbolic kinyan using chalifin. The owner and the buyer can transfer a handkerchief is symbolically of transferring the elephant. Okay? Inami, another place, but another possibility, b'shever es mimkaima. I want to buy your elephant. Your elephant is standing right there. So I say to you, look, I want this elephant to enter my property because everybody agrees that that's a valid kinyan. So rent me for the next 10 minutes that piece of ground that the elephant is standing on. I'll call it mine, and I'll be kind of the elephant because my chatzer is kind of my property can acquire. Okay? So that was the second possibility. Reb Zera gives another possibility. You go to the circus, and nowadays they don't have elephants anymore, but when the elephant climbs up on the little stool, so Reb Zera Omer, Mevi Arba Kalim Umanichin Tachas Raglav. You put 4 little stools, and the elephant stamps up on them, and now you've lifted him by putting the support under him. Shamat Mine, does that mean Kalev Shalokeyach Bereshus Moicher Kana Lokeyach? That if I put my briefcase down in your courtyard, you don't gain it. It doesn't change anything. It's still my briefcase and still your courtyard. So how can putting my little stools or my inverted pails in your chotzer and the elephant goes on them, how does that affect the kinyan that it's now mine? So what are we talking about? So we have the notion of a carmelist, which is not a Rishus Yachid and not a Rishus Rabbah. When it comes to like animal displays, you go to the market to buy animals. So there's the Rishus Yachid, there's the place where the mocher sets up his booth. And then there's the road you took to get there. That's a Rishus Rabbah. but there's the shoulder of the road. There's a gap because obviously he's not going to have his animals right up to the road. A car going by is going to hit it. So there's this gap between the Rishus Harabim and the Rishus Hayachid, which is not owned by the mocher, but he has the right to use it, as does somebody who's riding along. You can pull your car off the road and change your tire. So we're saying that you put your little stools in that spot, in this neutral territory. Hachi b'mayaskinen b'simta, in this area off of the road, but not yet the Rishus Harabim. And we have finished, and we have 10 minutes, and we'll stop there. What?
Get another 4 words to finish the whole tomorrow.
What? No.
The Chavilim is it? Yeah.
What? Enami bechavili zimuros. It would also be okay. So and a third possibility is you put something in front of the elephant. It's using the example of a pile of twigs or vines, and the elephant steps up. So you don't have to go schlep your stools from home to buy the elephant. You can take stuff in the neighborhood and pile it up and let the elephant stand. I apologize.
Why the mikveh with the lashon, with the tongue? I mean, after all, the tongue is the tongue that says tefillah, that says lashon hara. I guess
Right.
that's a key
So
spot.
when you become the rabbi of the shul, you can give a beautiful drasha on the significance of the tongue. Here all we're interested in is the tongue external or internal.
All right.
Okay, and since it's both, they can argue about it.
All right.
But if you want, Mel, I will jump in and save you when you're drowning in the mikveh because you kept your mouth open and you breathed in.
Okay.
So, okay, but I will bill you to dry clean my clothes because I've jumped in, I got my clothes ruined. And that's the halacha. You can bill the guy when you save him. No, I mean in the river too. If like if I'm walking with my sheep and you're drowning in the river and I